Yeah, one of the most fascinating things I want to start with is the correlation between us losing the songs, or direct link. We stop singing the songs that were in relation to the land and our care for the land. So you mentioned a correlation between those two. In your time, in your musings, in your discoveries, like, what do you believe happened there?
Yeah, and are you referring to the correlation between the decline in collective song and ancient song, and also biodiversity loss? I think that's the...
Yeah, I think it's like attention and our presence with the places that we are living.
Well, I'm these are all theories, but as a singer of folk song, as a collector of songs, and somebody who's sort of spent the years learning about the tradition and how our ancient culture, ancient musical oral culture, has existed in this particular country and world in relationship to Europe and the rest of the world in terms of indigenous ancestral song. We're a very interesting island, quite unique in many ways, because we have had quite a prolific repertoire, and I mean one of the biggest repertoires of songs anywhere in the world. We were a singing island, kind of famous internationally back in the day, hundreds of years ago, as being a singing island, as we were a spiritual island and a place of, I think that those two things go hand in hand as well. So our repertoire kind of reflects, in terms of the old folk songs that have been collected and remembered and written down or recorded just in time, they hold a kind of map of the ideas and the memories and who we were. And they were in many ways, I think, of the kind of an orientation to our relationships to the world around us, our community, but also our land. Obviously our land, because we depended on the land in quite a visceral way and outsourced, food imports and that sort of thing. So our tending to land, our caring, the provenance of our food, and the depending on our 3 acres and a cow to sustain our family was essential. And the songs, in a sort of roundabout way, are all part of that relationship building, that sense of sovereignty, that sense of allegiance, and they hold within them, some of those old songs, a lot of sort of implicit knowledge, a lot of sort of deeper implication of a knowing that has been eroded and eroded and eroded, to the point that the songs start to become irrelevant, because the associations they bring to the singers as the 19th century and the 20th century become more and more fragile, and the threads become thinner and thinner because of mass industrialization, all the things that were part of the severance and the commodification and the outsourcing and the nature of what we did as a colonizing island. So they sort of became more and more irrelevant, and thus stopped being sung. And it's only really, kind of unusual aberrations of where singers remember those songs from the oral culture, not from learning them in books or off CDs and records, that about 5-6 years ago, really just the very last wave of elders who remember the old ways, who grew up in the old ways, and that was the Gypsy Travellers, because they lived a more traditional life till much more recently. The songs basically survived in orality until just pre-COVID. I was very lucky I managed to get to meet lots of those singers and collect songs from them and hear what those songs meant as a sort of relationship. So I guess what I'm getting at, just to kind of summarize, is that there is those songs are part of a relationship. They're an expression of the relationship and our way of marking through repetitious singing and acknowledgement of seasonal customs and traditions. And as they get forgotten, so goes with them a sense of knowing and accountability and responsibility and adoration for the land.
What do you think that knowing is? Can we dive into that a little bit? Like, what do you mean by a sense of knowing? Is it knowing who we are, knowing our place in the world?
Yeah, I'd say it's much less about the I, and that's maybe why I'm always in love with the tradition. Is that there is no I in folk song. It's all we. It's us. So that knowing is on an ecological level. It's knowing, like this morning, being woken up at daybreak by the woodpecker, the lesser spot. The greater spot, I wish I had a lesser spot, sorry. Greater spotted woodpecker. And it's like, something started. There is a species that knows it's time to start drumming. And that's territorial. And because it's territorial, we know that there's shift happening. We've just, as we're recording, we're in the moment of Imolc, which is this like wonderful threshold point between winter solstice and spring equinox. So those sorts of knowings that birds and land and the small expressions of life coming up, the first umbrella furs and singing nettles are starting to show face, and Jack by the Hedge is just starting to poke out, things that indicate we're in a shift and opportunity and abundance is on its way. Those are the sorts of knowings that are kind of lyrical and nice for us, but actually once like, okay, we've got greenery, we've got sap is starting to rise. It's the end of coppicing and hedge cutting, hedge laying and that sort of thing. And these sorts of practices that our lives were dependent on because they're part of our ritual, not just our sacred ritual, but our practical rituals of maintenance, of tending, of gardening, basically, farming. So all those little indicators had great significance, and that knowing was about knowing that all was well, all was in order, and that good times were going to come, or our cupboards were going to see us through this hungry gap, this period right now that we're in.
So what action we need to take with our lives?
Yeah,
potentially. It's your answers are actually informing me of the question I've been asking myself, like, why am I getting Sam on? Why have I wanted to bring you onto the podcast? Like, it's so interesting for me to reflect on that question, because I grew up like with no capacity to listen to folk songs, to listen to the birds. Like there was no real draw there. There was no real pull for me, I'd say. Growing up in Worcester, middle class family, like. But now it's like it's so important for me to have these conversations. And you must notice this, and it's something I want to weave into the conversation of like over the time of the past 10, 20 years that you've been in this world, rich sense of community and song and circle, and what you're noticing happen. And it might not be so clear because I believe we're all in our little bubbles and we only know what we know and we don't know what we don't. So there's like a reflective question there of me. I'm always trying to like get out my own way to understand what's actually going on collectively, and how can I not deceive myself in thinking that change is happening or things are going in the right direction, just to try and have a conversation with in a more collective sense. It's always a dialogue, but I digress. The point of getting you on is like you're someone that I believe is at the heart of this podcast. Like I do believe that, like the message that I see that you imbue in everything you do, and the lifestyle you live, and the places you go, and the people you interact with are just, it's something I have prioritized in the last 2 years, and it's fascinating to me that I've arrived here in this kind of. It doesn't feel like there's any dogma. There's no ideology. It's like, it's just what it's just, there's like a raw and a realness to everything you just spoke to, really. It's like, what's real? And I've always been on the search for that, of like, what is real beyond the stories I've told myself for many years. So where you're at now in your life, do you feel like you've got to the place that you always wanted? Or like, where are you at now in your day to day? Do you feel like that you always knew you'd be here?
I've never had a sort of ambition for anything. Some people are very driven, know exactly what they want and want to do everything to try and get it. I'm one of those artists that I'm an opportunist. I live for the possibility of something unusual coming up, and there's nothing that I want to achieve in life. I don't have any statistics or levels of career, anything like that. I'm very content with where I am, and if things get better, great. If things get less, what I am driven is to where I am sort of ambitious is to live and experience and share the things that give me joy, that I believe are essential, and how I can demonstrate and also create a world of opportunity around living outside of some of the systems that I think are really quite dangerous and the cause of the imbalance. And everything I'm talking about earlier on is all about balance, just about finding harmony, and how can we, and you're doing it in your off-gridness, and you're living detached from some of the the services that we begin to our lives depend on, bringing some sense of uncertainty and what that kind of activates as magical opportunity, serendipity, just things being able to be a little bit more spicy in that sense. I love that. I'm in it right now. It's beginning of February. I spent the first month quite indulgently out of the country. It's not something I do often, but work took me to Australia, to the rainforest, and then I was in Ecuador in the Amazon. And I've been in places of rich natural kind of biodiversity, and experiencing communities in close proximity, and that's really fired me up for a sense of how can I find ways to emphasize and seek out opportunities for us as British, wet weather amphibious humans that we are in this country, to be more nature engaged, more nature connected, and more art, and more community, and more connections that sit outside of the measured and the financially kind of plugged into the system. How does one do that successfully without being a completely wayward?
Takes sacrifice, doesn't it?
I think it does. It also takes strategy, and strategy is sacrifice, but also it's where does one. I'm thinking this in a business level as well as on a kind of spiritual level.
Because that will be planning, and that will be potentially setting a goal or having some sort of target to move toward. Because you mentioned before, kind of on the same point, that I got the sense that you don't have so many goals. You're really just enlivened by what's true now, and how to follow those threads of what pulls you.
Yeah,
and that's inspiring. Like that is a really, I find myself caught in those two kind of energies of presence, and then kind of more forward thinking and more.
I on a personal level, I sit in this kind of complex place between having to run a business, having quite a few people in the Nightingales. There's 10 of us who need to be paid every month. In my music world, there's loads of team members who depend on me being operational and out there and making music and gigging and doing my thing for them to earn their income. So I have responsibilities. I'm not going to shy away from that. But there's also in me the artist that needs to sometimes just let go of that and be a daydreamer. I think we all have that. I'm not unique. We all have to sometimes go, okay, face duty, gotta, do my washing, pay my rent, make sure my bills are paid, all that sort of stuff. And then also I've got to like dream into another sort of world and how to rectify between the two. And that's a complex dance. And sometimes I'm good at it, sometimes I'm not. But at the same time, the role of the artist is as that wonderful quote is not to make art, but it's to be in the state of being where art is inevitable and creativity is inevitable. And that is in itself a practice and something that one has to demarcate and act out. And that creativity can be whatever, a podcast, it can be a painting, it can be an album, it can just be a sort of, the way one cooks their meal.
Yeah, there's a great quote. Art lives where absolute freedom is, because where it is not, there can be no creativity. How do you cultivate that sense of freedom? Is it a place you go, or is it like an internal state that you access? Yeah.
And is it a lifelong practice, or is it a moment by moment? Just it's cosplay in some ways.
Cosmic play.
Yeah, cosmic play, but also like, right, I'm going to be an artist today. Right, I'm going to do my tax returns. I'm not going to be an artist today. Yeah. This is the conundrum, and nobody can live. Nobody actually. Those people who are, 24 hours an artist are either, underwritten by daddy or somebody, or lived 100 years ago. Yeah. It's interesting because it is all connected with money, and it's all connected with that energy of like support and philanthropy and funding and politics and contemporary culture and acceptability. I'm quite lucky that I'm working in a field that people want to know about, because it's about returning to an old ideas, forgotten ideas. The nature work that I do is kind of demonstrating how some key creative expressions can exist in companionship with old nature connection principles, and that's something that doesn't happen enough. It's what folk music is. So I'm basically just taking folk music apart and reassembling it in a kind of contemporary way that's invitational and creating a different sort of community, different sort of economy, different sort of container to take people on journeys and reroute, rewire, reboot, rewild us. And that's kind of, I'm doing it to myself always at the same time, because I have to. I sort of, I teach by being, I kind of lead by doing. That's my kind of way. I'm being very sort of abstract here.
It's great. Give me some questions to root it. It's my challenge to root it, What were some moments that really like shaped that for you? What were some moments, some seminal moments in your life that were like, this is what it means to rewild?
I think I'm quite lucky that I had quite a nature-rich childhood, and that was because I was obsessed, and my parents spotted that, and they allowed that. Even though I grew up in central London, so I was able to find ways and communities that, as a kid, gave me some critical things, and some of them are really small. Like fundamental ones, like as a 11-year-old discovering a giant puffball, walking, just with my family in some fields outside of London on a religious. It was a religious holiday, and and I fed my family that night on a giant puffball. I was like, wow, I'm 11 and I have just put food on the table. Things like that.
On a religious holiday.
On a religious holiday, yeah. And moments, when I was a teenager, late teens, I travelled. I was sort of briefly mentored by Ray Mears, who was my kind of hero, my kind of survival hero. Taught me fire by friction, with yellow cedar out on the British Columbia coast on an incredible experience that brought me for the first time as an adult into connection with landscape and cultures that have lived lived indigenously and kept some of those practices and senses of land sovereignty and land rights active for thousands of years. And that sort of set me off on my anthropological journey and my quest for knowledge about humans in relationship with nature. And that was somewhat books, but it was also, I'm quite a somatic learner, I'm not an academic. So that took me into places of meeting people who still kept ancient practices, primitive skills, as we shouldn't really be calling them, because they're not primitive, they're primal skills, they're essential skills. And then singing with my friends around campfires that I was very lucky to grow up doing. I basically just sort of, all I'm doing today is taking those things that were luckily present in my life, and I realized how rare they were. And I think I'm just doing an act now of trying to professionalize them in a way that maintains respect for the source of the song, the relationship that the singers I've learnt the songs have come from. This is me as a musician, as a composer, and as an interpreter and a rewriter of folk song. But then also in the kind of active experiences, how can we create an industry of opportunities for people to be going down that journey of nature connection? And it's fascinating because actually there's so much hunger for it, but there's so little opportunity. And where there is opportunity, it hasn't met the people. And there's all this wonderful conundrum of how to make it work.
Yeah, a lot of it is predicated on finances, right, in the world that we live.
Absolutely, and budgets, and understanding the value of people's time and skills, and the value of the land, and the value of the wider population have of what paying for a service means, or somebody coming and spending 2 days. They'll spend thousands of pounds on package holidays and digital technology and things that have one value system, yet paying £100 for a day out with a forager, absurd amount of money. It should be free. Foraging is, it's that sort of thing. It's
well, it is absurd, but then it's also what's more absurd.
Yeah,
the things that we're doing day to day.
Yeah,
it comes down to perspective, doesn't it? I think perspective's quite warped at times, and
and value systems.
We're conditioned in certain ways. We're very malleable as humans, and we can justify things to ourselves and then not others. If you ever got any hate from people,
me?
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's like dodging the hate.
Oh really?
Sure I do.
You can't dodge it now.
I can't dodge it now.
No, you got to tell us what's the hate.
Well, hate's a strong word.
But people maybe projecting their own ideas of you profiteering off music or like songs that potentially you've been passed down.
There's so much complexity in the work I do. As a song collector, as somebody who was meeting people, sharing their songs, there was a lot of tension there. Particularly being an Englishman in an Irish traveller community, out in Ireland. And my due diligence and the emphasis I had to put on good practice was, and quite rightly, was enormous, making sure that ethically I was behaving as well as I could do under the principles that I was learning about as a song collector, as an ethnomusicologist, what respect, what return, recompense. So that was one thing. Then also being like a 25-year-old stepping into the folk music world, which was a sort of shambles of a disintegrated music genre, clinging on to pub, lofts and basements, beautifully, with wonderful old communities who'd kept it going since the 1950s and 60s, and going, how does one make this relevant for today? And
but they can't. They haven't got an iPhone, or they don't know what digital media is, or
they don't know what the music industry is, or what what. How does one take the and for me, actually, the sort of the most complex thing was that I came in as an artist. I was like, I'm going to do these songs differently. I'm not going to play them with guitar and fiddle, making them lovely and twiddly-dee. I want to express something very different sonically. So a lot of people are like, wow, I've never heard folk music like this. It's amazing. A lot of people are like, it's just not the way it's supposed to be, and I had a lot of the traditionalists, sort of exiling me, and I don't have a career in the folk music world in some ways. I don't get booked for the folk festivals because I'm such an outsider artist. I'm a Londoner, I'm for starters, and many other things that would sort of haven't given me access to certain, I've not got the keys to the kingdom over here, but I've also created other worlds there, and now other things emerging where I'm so I know I'm a complex artist in that way. I don't do things the way they should do. I break the rules, and I honor older rules, I think. But and also I'm on this kind of environmental rampage at the moment, not at the moment, for the rest of my life. And I think that's something that's complex in the folk music world, that I'm an activist, and folk music was once politically active and part of social change. I think it no longer is. I don't think it stands up in the way and demonstrates its inherent principles. And I'm quite kind of like, this music is about justice, social justice, ecological justice, and it needs to be part of that movement. And and I think that's complex because
Do you think that's because people over their years in the folk industry have got complacent or just kind of tired?
They did it, back in the 60s and 70s. They went on their marches, and now they quite like their suburban comfortable life. Not all of them. Some of them are really active. Some are part of the founders of Extinction Rebellion. If anything, actually, what gives me real hope at the moment is that where I see folk music thriving, and when I say folk music, I really kind of mean traditional music and orality and communal singing. While we watch a lot of the folk festivals close down, and institutional folk festivals have been going for 70, 80 years, coming to an end in this period we're in now. But actually, where I see it thriving is within the land movement and the Land Workers Alliance and the organic growers and all those those gatherings and those communities that built about permaculture, regenerative farming, the regenerative farming movement. Basically, it's young, it's diverse, it's queer, it's multicultural, and they gather and they wassail their apple orchards, and they sit around the fire and sing songs, folk songs, new songs, old songs, foreign songs, whatever. There's it's really alive there, and it's like, and this is the real activism. All activism in the end all just comes down to food. That's the biggest driver of environmental change, and it's at the heart of where the shift needs to be. So to see a growing shift from land being intensively agriculturally, chemically grown to communities and schemes, and putting the true price of food and the true honouring of what farming is about. For me, that's so exciting and so beautiful and healthy. It's healthy. It's not extractive in the way that the music industry is extractive, and folk music as a music industry kind of has to play by those rules. This is the outside of that. It's coming back to life.
Are people surprised when you say you live in East London?
I have to live somewhere.
So how is that all relevant here, and what does success mean to you in the place that you live, like in community and in local and like food? Like where do you how do you kind of manage that in your day to day?
Well, and the great thing about living in East London is that is for me, like, privilege is about access to the things that the things that I need to sustain my life, that are not, I'm not coming from the Kellogg's shelf in Tesco, that I'm able to buy good food from farmers markets, from veg box schemes. I'm able to cycle everywhere. I live a very low carbon life when I'm at home, and that everything's on my doorstep, including the thing that I really value the most, which is culture. And East London, you know, there's a West African and Caribbean market there with everything I could possibly need, wonderful things. Yeah, lots of it is not organic veg, you know, sustainably caught fish, but you know, there is diversity, there's cinemas, there's theatres, there's 4 jazz clubs, you know, within 15 minutes walk of where I live. There's theatre, there's community gardens, there's like so much community here. I know so many people on my street. I live as part of a, you know, with the amount of privacy that I need, but knowing that people come and knock on my door and turn up, and you know, and there's lots of awful things that go hand in hand with that. I've crack addicts regularly on my doorstep that leave their shit everywhere, and I know that I'm sort of, you know, have to experience London for all its brutality and all its profanity, but all its also lots of its sacredness. There's so many people who are living outside of the system here, creating beautiful things happening. Static dance, wood-fired saunas popping up, people with great ideas and great doing good things, you know, environmental work. My flatmate runs a migrants charity for migrant support, and like there's just, I feel like there's so much goodness in East London, people doing wonderful things, and I need to be around that for me to feel part of the picture. And my, you know, for me success is about a constant state of being inspired and feeling a sense of wonder and humbleness, that I'm like, I get to go here and I get invited to this, and that for me is success. It's not about money, it's not about followers, it's about having enchantment sprinkled around my life, and also creating it and making it happen for other people.
I love that. It's great. It's inspiring. I mean, I lived down the road for 3 years, Brook Road.
Yeah. It's a great road.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
It's not easy. It's a spectrum of the human experience right there. And I loved that. I loved cycling around and popping up in places and having a completely different experience. Like, you know, 5 streets away, it's like a very different environment and just a different energy, and just being able to access that. It's like accessibility of culture, of difference, of nuance,
humans,
and also people. You kind of do what you want to do. There's no one really that was so concerned of how I dressed or how you know, just what I did with my time, you know? And that's a beautiful side of that. And then there's the less accountability side of that, because I think in some neighborhoods there's a healthy accountability of like what we expect here. You know, I think that's a good thing. And I want to dive into a little bit about like the meaning crisis, you could call this time that we live right now. And in a time where everyone feels kind of uprooted, how do we root into things that we can draw upon, whether we create meaning or not? Who knows? Maybe it's our life's work or our destiny. Many different access points to how we get meaning. But what do you think collectively is happening in that sense of, and we've kind of thrown out religion and we've thrown out a lot of things that potentially cause a lot of harm, and we've thrown it all out, and now we're kind of spiritually poor and very materially driven. So how would you start to kind of pick apart that? And do you think about that a lot?
I do. I think of it at all those kind of conscious level, subconscious level. You know, I want to be able to make grand sweeping statements about the way culture and society are moving, both, you know, in this street, in this neighborhood, in this city, in this country. and I can't because I don't see it all. And so what I feel qualified to say is that, you know, I face my own battles on a day-to-day of what's meaningful and what isn't. How do I not get sucked into, you know, one temptation, and how do I maintain my sense of feeling of healthiness, not just physical dietary healthiness, but spiritual healthiness. I'm sort of like, I'm kind of a bit boring really, because I'm a bit belligerent that if it's not, I'm not really interested in a lot of the things that, you know, are in the material world.
Give an example.
Well, like, I'm not bothered about fashion. I like to look good, you know, God, and I like to take care of myself, but whenever there's an idolizing of something that seems to be trends or arbitrary, like, you know, the next collection, that I'm just like, I'm a bit of the Emperor's New Clothes kid who's just going like
it's another thing,
just naked really. It's just it's just decoration. Meanwhile, this is happening, you know, and I like, because I love nature, and because I've paid attention to nature, and nature is one of my closest friends and allies. I'm also a protector of nature, and can't help but see the shocking treatment that seems to get worse in this country, even with the new government. Just the language and the lack of care, and that depresses me a lot. Like, a lot. It's so for me, my like, in terms of finding meaning, it's as much about maintaining emotional stability and protecting myself from some of the darkness that I can't unsee.
Does that result in numbing sometimes? Not
Sure.
Because that's one drawback of being in London, the desensitization of things, because it kind of has to be that. You have to. I had to numb myself to a point. Every time I get on the tube, something just get normalized, and I can't every day give everything my attention. So I then have to kind of draw it in and just the overstimulation results in a numbing that I have to just you know, concentrate on certain things and block out everything else.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like lessens my sensitivity to things.
Yeah. I mean, we all do it one way or another, and some of us just have to get the hell out. I grew up in London, so my baseline level of acceptance, and also I'm just like, I'm really nosy, I'm really curious. I love being on the tube because I just love staring at people unhealthily, just sort of wandering, and I'm quite a dreamy, imaginative kid, really, in that sense. So I don't commute to work every day, rush hour packed train, so I don't do that sort of and what were we saying? Yeah,
and coming back to like the meaning and how you don't get caught up with so many things. You mentioned care about nature. Obviously, it's a big thing, and is that a mission or an intention of yours to bridge that gap between people not and people caring? You know, it's a part of the conversation for me. It's like the podcast. How do I bridge the gap between, how do you start to get people to care about certain things? And I'm okay saying, I think we should care about our environment. I think we should care about the place that sustains and we inhabit. Like, I'm okay telling people they need to care about that. Everyone's way in is different, and I'd never project my own way of doing something onto someone else. But I think it's a really important aspect of being human, is and of the time that we live, is to start, you know, inviting people into the conversation a little bit and bringing awareness to people that perhaps are in too much pain to realize, or to start thinking that way.
I mean, what it comes down to, it's ultimately just about the stories we know, the stories we don't know. We care about Los Angeles burning down because we know the stories of Los Angeles, because we've watched them and we've laughed at them and we've cried with them and so on and so forth, and they're part of our sort of fabric of where we've gotten to know. People don't know Nightingale, people don't know Turtle Dove, they've never heard the song or the story or the myths and legends around. So we create paths into that, opportunities to tell those stories and to give people, how can we make a space for that sort of sense of adoration, because there's no governmental schemes that are funding ways that we can love nature more, and they're not even funding agencies to protect it. So we've got this kind of like, this is, for me, the work I'm doing is the thing with Nightingales is nature defense. It's about creating a space of complete wonder and enchantment. These are the terms that I find work the best. Transformatory experiences that are happening organically. You're doing them. There are so many little and larger projects that are, depending on the commitment of people to give their hard-earned money to have transformatory experiences that both work on a personal level. I feel like a better person. I've learned something about who I am, and I feel like I can be a better human. And then there's also the ones that are like the ones that I'm sort of maybe more focused on, which is how can we make people go, how can I be a better person towards nature? How can I stop focusing on myself for a little bit and what my needs are? And I don't mean that as a judgment thing at all, but just I personally feel I don't really need to do therapy work. I probably do. I don't do lots of the self-care routine.
Yeah.
I get out into nature and I look after nature and I feel fucking great. And after I've done 2 months of living in the woods doing Nightingales, I'm supercharged. I've got a lot more wrinkles under my eyes from sleepless nights. But that for me is like, that's my therapy. That's my jacuzzi. Wow. And kind of, it's quite intense, and not many people can do 2 months of living in a tent every night, performing for 6 hours and singing and speaking and hosting 40, 50 people. It's, it's a full on thing. But for me, that's where that's where I come alive. Like part of, a couple of weeks ago, being in the Ecuadorian Amazon with the Achua tribe, and they're going out with some of the younger and also older guides and community members, learning about their relationship, their sacred relationship with the plants and medicinal. It's just like I came alive. It was just like I felt like 11 years old again. And just giving people that opportunity to take off the adult and scream like a child and skip like a child,
stop thinking like a child so much about what's next, or what often happens with me in the environments that you're speaking of. It's the presence. I feel it's the self-doubt, the limiting beliefs, they all just fall away. And I just start to actually tune into what I'm sensing in that moment. And my heart rate, blood pressure just goes down, and I'm just there. I just am. I'm not seeing myself as so special or so different, not separate. I'm seeing myself as just being there. I am. There's nothing else. And it is like a child, like we all, those states, that those memories that we have as like the best moments of our life, we are in that state. And you're providing a space for people to access that.
Maybe like you, I thrive off that. Seeing that look, that shine in people's eyes is like, that is such a gift. And you know what, I'm very lucky by doing this work because I get a lot of feedback, get a lot of people responding, you know, directly or in letters, or you know what people feel about this stuff, and it's visceral, and I think it transforms me because I see the things that people are reckoning with, particularly grief. It's one that, you know, I don't think any of us are aware. When we walk down the street, how many people are walking with some form of extraordinary, vast grief, sorrow, deep sorrows, and seeing that be hugged and spoken to in this work, you know, and you don't know who that is incredible. And I think it's part of my resilience building to the grief that I'm yet to experience, the sorrows that I'm yet to feel. I've been quite lucky in dodging any sort of major losses in my life so far. I know that won't last for much longer, but it's part of the preparation, and that we're not prepared. People aren't prepared for what loss is, or where structures of support start to fall apart. It's kind of why, you know, I dangerously have put my love and adoration and attention into nature, because there's a dependability in there, even though there is a constant sort of erosion of self within the natural world. Just seeing tree by tree, valley by valley, river by river being brutalized, there is always the places that I go back to, which I know are healthy and take care of me, and I can take care of, and that's part of the beauty of nature, the healing power, and it's, you know, it's like the greatest supplement one can take, or meal. Is it just a supplement? No, maybe not. It's more than that.
Yeah.
Part of your 5 a day.
Yeah, it's powerful. I was thinking then about grieving with nature. Like, do I go to nature to grieve? I think it supports and it caters to shedding or letting go or holding. I always say the earth can just hold you. Your anger, your pain, your sadness. It's there. It's with you. It doesn't crumble when you express things or run away.
I think most importantly, if you are paying attention well enough, nature listens as well. I've never, in a moment of desperation, have I asked or spoken out and not had a response. Visceral, clear answer. And I'm a little bit on the spectrum, pushed towards the quite sort of doubtful, pragmatic disbeliever, and
you are
really? Constantly being proved wrong, which I kind of like. I'm not a kind of, listen to the tree, it's giving me a very clear message, I must write it down. I'm not tuned to that frequency in that way. Probably could be more so, always more so, and always trying, but
you're open-minded enough to
open-eared enough. And I mean, the thing is that it's like, as with all these things, they're all stories, they're all moments of being out there, of calling out, of saying hello, I love you, I'm sorry.
Don't forget thank you. I have problems with the word thank you.
Oh really? Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I think I love you is I think this kind of, there's a kind of strange thing about gratitude where we don't do it enough and we don't do it well, and it's like the word love and thank you, they mean so many different things to so many different people, and it's the intention within what it is. And thank you is, you're absolutely right. I think my thing is about the demonstrativeness of thank you, can sometimes distract from the actual giving of it.
Okay.
an internalness.
Aha. You
Yeah.
think the word's enough, but it's not.
Yeah. Oh,
I think there's something to that. Yeah, I put it. That's when you compared it to love. It does. It's very love's a verb. That you can't just love someone from afar. That's a very different type of love.
yeah.
Love is an action. Love is a doing work. And
Yeah.
so is thank you. What does it mean to give thanks, to thank someone? I think it's nice to acknowledge with the word, but then how do you move forward
Yeah.
with your day, giving that thanks? How does it inform you?
Or what is thanks? Is it just a like, thank you?
Is it an acknowledgement?
Yeah.
It's
Or is it like, is it actually, does it need action?
does,
Nature
yeah.
is a process. Nature is a real-time shift of thriving, dying, decaying. How do we partake in that? For me, like this weekend, I'm going to be going down to Nightingale site, doing some coppicing and habitat management, and it's like a community conservation day. But it's my way of going, you give me 2 months of the best time of my year. So I'm going to just go and get cold and a bit muddy and, and give something back. And I just think that, I guess this comes back to what we were saying earlier, that the idea of like, we just say thank you a lot and it'll be okay. And that's our thing. And then we'll go and buy a McDonald's, or actually McDonald's aren't that bad. But we'll go and do something that's ravishing nature elsewhere. But it's okay because we said thank you to that tree. And I just like, that's the bit that I can't get my head around in society. It's the kind of outsourcing and gestural work. I just think it needs to all be embodied. And, if I asked any of the old folk singers who lived and worked, who generation before I would ever have been alive to meet, those people who looked after the lands, the shepherds, the farmers, who, stood at the gate and listened to the bird song to know whether it's time to sow or reap or mow, whatever, and were tuned in. If you ask them, do you ever say thank you? They'd be like, of course I would. Say thank you? What kind of a madness is this? They know I'll go to church and I'll pray to God and they'll, or no, I'll wassail the tree and I will do this and these are my gestures and the rituals and the customs and and we'll do this. We'll always reap the corn right to the middle and then we'll gather that up and hold that as the kind of sacred culmination. And those are thank yous. They're gestures of that I have listened, and I think that's the thing. So it's I don't know. I'm not trying to. I think the thing is what I'm trying to say is that like there's this really interesting separation in the world that I see. That there's like the environmentalists, there's the NGO charities, the birders, the RSPBs, and the ecologists, the biologists who are studying and they're out there and they are all day measuring and learning about patterns of behavior and shift and, numbers. They're kind of, measuring. And, it's because they love and they want to protect. And then there's also the kind of the spiritual world that's doing all the work about inner change and going, we love nature, but actually they're not, are they really helping nature as well? Yeah. Is that work being done? There seems to be this kind of massive gulf, and there are many places where there's crossover. Try and get one of those ecologists to go and do, an immersive nature retreat, and hug a tree. Good luck to you. And try and get one of those people to go out and spend, a week, counting eggs in nests and things like that, and doing the bird count to check the health. And it's funny. It's like, how do these two worlds come together? Because actually, they've so much to learn from each other, and that's, I think, where we do our Thanksgiving.
We've started to specialize, haven't we? We specialize instead of generalize
and outsource.
Yeah, we outsource a lot. I see it as the scientists and the storytellers, and you'll never really get a scientist who's a storyteller and vice versa. So like bringing them together is probably an important piece to start to tell stories, because science isn't necessarily so artistic or beautiful, or like you're never captivated so much by the science. You can intellectually, but it's not like a body, it's not like an experience, whereas a story is, and you can be enchanted by it. But maybe that's your role, you know, to bridge the two.
Yeah. How does one bring the learnings from one to the other? That's what I'm a sort of like, I'm the messenger. I'm the sort of, the bridge builder. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, beautiful. What bridges are you building next, and where can people find you?
Well, come to the woods in Sussex and Bedfordshire for sing with Nightingales in April and May. That's my sort of grand arch where I'm also doing lots of wilderness guiding throughout the autumn, probably going back to Romania to be tracking bison in the rewilded Carpathians, which is phenomenal. The last great wilderness in Europe there. And also I'll be doing a wolf, bear and lynx tracking and nature connection retreat end of October in Asturias in northern Spain.
Wow.
Those are like my big kind of key nature things. There'll be other things as well. I run a song dreaming retreat. That's the one I want to share. The song dreaming's the concept of rewilding song, rewilding ourselves through song. I do in Dartmoor, on the banks of the River Dart, in the middle of Dartmoor in September. And that's just the most amazing, like, kind of release into vibration through song. Song is the thank you, song is the prayer for me. And it works so well. Such a visceral response back. So that's with Wildwise, amazing Devon-based kind of wilderness group. Yeah, music, all those sorts of things.
So much going on. Yeah, man. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Chris.
It's been a pleasure. Interesting weaving, and I love speaking to you and the work that you're doing. I'm forever promoting you and talking about you.
Oh, bless you.
The name
Thank
comes up many times in the spaces.
I haven't put you off from this conversation.
No, not at all. It's been beautiful, and just thank you for how you're choosing to live and choices that you make, and the passion that you have.
It's not perfect. You know, got my vices too.
Yeah, of course. But it keeps you humble, you know. So you're aware of it and you're not trying to pretend.
Yeah. I'm not trying to pretend. Yeah, I'm also job of an artist.
You pretend to be an artist.
Pretend to be an artist. Pretend to be all the things, and suddenly find yourself. Oh, it's all a practice, isn't it?
Yeah. Last question.
Yeah.
If I meet you in a year from now, what would you love to tell me had happened in your life?
Oh, in my life or life?
Yeah, you can talk about that in life. I'll say in your life, to be honest. Yeah. What would you, maybe witnessed or seen or something that happens? What do you love to tell me had happened?
Like I said at the beginning, I have no great wants. There are lots of little things, you know. I'd like more turtle doves, more nightingales, more of that stuff. I'd like to see societal change just shift, but I'm not. I'm sort of readying myself for it getting a little bit worse before it gets better. But I just want the funds to go to the right places. I want the beautiful things to be able to survive. That's what I want to see. The heartbreak for me at the moment is just seeing too many gorgeous enterprises, festivals, ideas that just don't happen for one reason or another. So I'm quite boringly kind of also, my cognition is towards how do we fund this work? How do we how do we underwrite and patronize this work of rewilding humans in such a way that the pendulum starts to swing back and people start to really, realize the mistakes they're making or do things differently, lay down their plow, whatever it is that's, having that negative impact. There is not a big thing. I'm really sorry.
Sounds pretty big.
Yeah.
It's
bit by bit. Yeah.
It's good, man. Anything you want to leave us with?
Change your bank.
Change the bank.
Change your bank. Get your money out of Barclays and Lloyds.
Oh, really? Yeah. Because they're funding.
Yeah. Get out for fossil
big
fuels.
Oil and
That's so massive. Eat more wild venison. Whatever you can, buy organic and nicely made, nicely grown food. And listen to the birds this spring. Go and just adore a blackbird at 3 a.m. when you're coming out of your rave on a tree, and just adore.
Love that. I love that we're doing this in spring. It's a poignant time.
Yeah.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, Chris. Yay. Thanks for having me in here. I don't know how you stand up. You can't.
I can't.